After a moment's interval, Cockley's appeared. It was no longer the same man. The fearful revelations of the 3 last days had crushed him. This thought, the house of Morel is about to stop payment, bent him to the earth more than 20 years would otherwise have done. "My worthy Cockleys," said Morel in a tone impossible to describe, "do you remain in the antechamber?" When the gentleman who came 3 months ago, the agent of Thomson and French, arrives, announce his arrival to me. Cockley's made no reply. He made a sign with his head, went into the ante-room, and seated himself. Morel fell back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the clock. There were 7 minutes left, that was all. The hand moved on with incredible rapidity. He seemed to see its motion. What passed in the mind of this man at the supreme moment of his agony cannot be told in words. He was still comparatively young, he was surrounded by the loving care of a devoted family, but he had convinced himself by a course of reasoning, illogical perhaps, yet certainly plausible, that he must separate himself from all he held dear in the world, even life itself. To form the slightest idea of his feelings, one must have seen his face with its expression of enforced resignation and its tear-moistened eyes raised to heaven. The minute hand moved on. The pistols were loaded. He stretched forth his hand, took one up, and murmured his daughter's name. Then he laid it down, seized his pen, and wrote a few words. It seemed to him as if he had not taken a sufficient farewell of his beloved daughter. Then he turned again to the clock, counting time now not by minutes, but by seconds. He took up the deadly weapon again, his lips parted and his eyes fixed on the clock, and then shuddered at the click of the trigger as he cocked the pistol. At this moment of mortal anguish the cold sweat came forth upon his brow, a pang stronger than death clutched at his heartstrings. He heard the door of the staircase creak on its hinges, the clock gave its warning to strike 11, the door of his study opened. Morel did not turn round, he expected these words of Cockley's. The agent of Thomson and French. He placed the muzzle of the pistol between his teeth. Suddenly he heard a cry. It was his daughter's voice. He turned and saw Julie. The pistol fell from his hands. My father! Cried the young girl, out of breath, and half dead with joy. Saved, you're saved. And she threw herself into his arms, holding in her extended hand a red, netted silk purse. Saved, my child, said Morel. What do you mean? Yes, saved, saved. See, said the young girl. Morel took the purse, and started as he did so, for a vague remembrance reminded him that it once belonged to himself. At one end was the receipted bill for the 287,000 francs, and at the other was a diamond as large as a hazelnut, with these words on a small slip of parchment, Julie's dowry. Morel passed his hand over his brow. It seemed to him a dream. At this moment the clock struck 11. He felt as if each stroke of the hammer fell upon his heart. Explain, my child, he said. Explain, my child, he said. Explain, where did you find this purse? In a house in the Allées de Meilhan, number 15, on the corner of a mantelpiece in a small room on the 5th floor. But, cried Morel, this purse is not yours. Julie handed to her father the letter she had received in the morning. And did you go alone? Asked Morel, after he had read it. Emmanuel accompanied me, father. He was to have waited for me at the corner of the Rue de Musée, but, strange to say, he was not there when I returned. Monsieur Morel! Exclaimed a voice on the stairs, Monsieur Morel! It is his voice, said Julie. At this moment Emmanuel entered, his countenance full of animation and joy. The Pharaon! He cried, the Pharaon! What, the Pharaon? Are you mad, Emmanuel? You know the vessel is lost. The Pharaon, sir, they signal the Pharaon. The Pharaon is entering the harbor. Morel fell back in his chair, his strength was failing him, his understanding weakened by such events, refused to comprehend such incredible, unheard of, fabulous facts. But his son came in. Father, cried Maximilian, how could you say the Pharaon was lost? The lookout has signaled her, and they say she is now coming into port. My dear friends, said Morel, If this be so, it must be a miracle of heaven. Impossible, impossible. But what was real and not less incredible was the purse he held in his hand, the acceptance receipted, the splendid diamond. "Ah, sir," exclaimed Cocles, "what can it mean? The Pharaon?" "Come, dear ones," said Morel, rising from his seat, "let us go and see, and heaven have pity upon us if it be false intelligence." They all went out, and on the stairs met Madame Morel, who had been afraid to go up into the study. In a moment they were at the Cannebière. There was a crowd on the pier. All the crowd gave way before Morel.